What is going on, RotoGrinders? This is the best ball hot take show presented by Underdog Fantasy. I'm your host, Dean, joined today by Chris Prince. You guys know him better as Beermakersfan. Beer, former FanDuel Live Finals champion. Beer, how's life in your world?
Life is good, buddy. We got football right around the corner. I'm keeping my fingers crossed. We got all the other major sports go. I mean, how can you be mad right now with everything going on? So super busy, but I had to carve out an hour to talk some football here with you guys.
Yeah, got some baseball lineups to make today. Got some basketball lineups to make today. Of course, football right around the corner here with some best ball talk. Christopher Gimino, you don't have to tell him this because he's hard at work here behind the scenes at RG with all the good stuff as far as ownership projection and everything else going on here. A former XFL guru. He might be an XFL guru again, actually, thanks to The Rock, potentially. Gimino, what's going on, dude?
It's my kind of world right now, Dean. You know, I'm scoring in WNBA. Like, there's basketball of all different types. There's baseball. You know, we've still got all the specialist sports going. NFL is about to come back. It's an embarrassment of riches right now. I cannot be more excited.
We're going to talk about Underdog Fantasy in a second. Before we do that, Beer, say, hey, we're on our bubble. Maybe some people don't know. What is, they played season-long fantasy. They probably played daily fantasy as well. What is best ball? What is that concept here? Explain.
Basically, you draft and you forget it. A lot of people don't have time to go through season-long waivers and trades and everything that goes along with that. And what's the best part of a season? It's drafting your team. So that's all you're going to do here on Underdog Fantasy is draft a team, and it figures out the rest for you. Automatically is going to set your best lineup each and every week. They got, low-stake contests, high-stake contests, a big best ball championship contest with a $25 buy-in, which is a great price point for anybody to jump in and take a shot at winning $200,000. So I think it's one of the best, obviously one of the growing forms of fantasy, but great for people on the go that want to get invested, want to have some fantasy football teams, but would want to do all the work that goes along with season-long teams or even with DFS, messing with salaries and ownership projections and things like that. This is a way to draft, have fun, and have some skin in the game. So they're not new to the game. I'm rocking my draft shirt here.
There it
so
is.
if you know about draft, these are the people behind Underdog Fantasy, so clearly know what they're doing. Super excited that this is out and ready to rock.
Yeah, Underdog Fantasy available now on iOS, Android. You can get on your laptop if you want to as well. And like you said, from the minds that brought you draft, it's like the movie. If you liked, then you'll love. If you like draft, then you'll love Underdog Fantasy. You mentioned the $25 tournament. $25 jump in. You can turn 25 smackers into $200K, $1 million total prize pool as far as their signature Best Ball Mania tournament. Additionally, they have I think contests from $3 to $100, I want to say. Also, be on the lookout. We're going to be doing more shows here at RG for best ball oriented. I want to say this is our first one with being presented by Underdog Fantasy. But of course, if you go back, we did shows on 5 other teams. Well, I should say we're going to knock out 5 teams specifically today. We might kind of go off the reservation on a player or two, but essentially we're going to stick to Washington, Houston, Seattle, Buffalo, Gimino. Try to stay. Let's not get too fancy. I know you're part of Bill's Mafia. Let's not just say everybody just draft them in the first round. We'll talk about that in a second. And then last but not least is Indianapolis. And again, we've had previous shows where he knocked out 5 other teams. Go ahead and find those. And who knows, maybe we'll recycle them plenty of time before the season comes up. And new news is coming around every single day. That said, diving on in, Gimino, open it up for us as far as the Washington football team. It's a disaster from a fantasy perspective outside of basically Scary Terry, right? Like, do we want anybody else? Let's talk about Terry first. And then the rest of the team's just kind of meh. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, so Terry McLaurin is one of my absolute favorite best ball picks of the season for a number of different reasons. The first one is that jabroni extraordinaire Dwayne Haskins won't be the starting quarterback for even 10 weeks of the season, let alone the entire season. I'm quite confident we're going to see Alex Smith come back based on some recent reports. Now, look, he's coming off a major injury, and I'm not trying to say Terry McLaurin can't have a good season even if Haskins is the guy the entire time. But I am more optimistic with the understanding that there could be some appearances by Smith this season if Haskins doesn't hold up his end of the deal. And that's a good thing for Terry McLaurin, who faces very limited competition for targets anywhere. They have one of the worst tight end situations in the entire league. The backfield is basically a quadrant of guys who aren't particularly known for being exceptional pass catchers. You've got a rookie, any rookie in COVID season, I'm not going to trust, like their scat back, the combo back Gibson, who's coming in this season. I am basically going to be trusting McLaurin to be the extreme workload carrier in the passing game, the true ex-alpha guy who's shown he can get downfield for explosive plays, a guy who's very likely to have 100 catches this season by my perspective, and just someone that I want to go out of my way to get. I think it might be hard to win a best ball tournament if he has anything close to the kind of season I expect him to have.
All right, Beer, what say you? First, talk about what Alex Smith may or may not start. We don't really know just yet. What's your projection as far as who's going to be the starting quarterback week 1?
I mean, I think it's Haskins to start with. I think they're going to try and see what they have there. But, Dean, this debacle starts with the name up top, the Washington football team, and it all just trickles down to all these players as well. I mean, who's excited to go out and buy some Washington football team swag? Who's excited to draft into these Redskins? I don't mind McLaurin. Gimino's a little higher than I am, but we did see glimpses in a terrible offense. This guy put up some big numbers. So another year under his belt. He's got that connection with Haskins. So if they do go to Alex Smith, maybe that hurts McLaurin a little bit in the long run. But you look around at the rest of this team, and it's a cast of characters. Antonio Gibson is the next Christian McCaffrey. So how do we not take a shot on this guy, according to Ron Rivera? But they have about 9,000 running backs. I don't really have interest in any of them. Darius Geis is still living off his LSU days. Just to name, the guy can't stay healthy. Adrian Peterson is older than I am. Gibson, they got 10 other running backs there. You could pull 100 people on the street and nobody knows who the hell the tight end is there or the wide receiver too. So just a disaster. I don't mind McLaurin where he's going. Not going to reach for him. This is a team I really want no exposure to. It's not even sneaky to stack this team towards the end of the draft. Sometimes you have teams you can get cheap. You can build a little stack of. I just don't see it here with this team.
Also, you know what the quarterback's going to be.
Dean, wait a second. You got to reach for this guy, Beer. I want to talk you into this. I think when you take a look at the floor ceiling combinations that are going to come into play for the price for best ball, I think for this specific format, how can you not like the opportunity? Like, let's just say the Redskins are better than we think they are. They're going to be in division with the Giants and with the Eagles, not defenses that we are particularly scared of in the passing game. I don't think Dallas is very good. We're going to be in COVID season where we're going to have guys opting out and and certainly situations where the cornerback's already one of the most scarce positions in the entire league. If Dwayne Haskins can complete the forward pass at all, how is this guy not going to just have an extremely high floor with ceiling potential to be in the top 12 of wide receivers? I mean, I just look at what this guy could potentially do based on what we saw last year. A guy that they earmarked, especially in preseason, to not even see a snap because they saw the potential that he has. I just think that we haven't even seen the best he has to offer. But we're working off one season of this guy. I mean, Beer, am I convincing you at all? Can we get excited about McLaurin?
I mean, I like him. I'm looking at my rankings now. I have him wide receiver 24. So I don't know how that compares to where you have him. So a low-end wide receiver 2. The concern is the offense. And if he's the only guy out there, why are we not putting all our coverage on this guy and making Antonio Gandy Golden beat us or whoever else they're going to try to roll out at wide receiver? So that's the concern is
what a name, by the way.
The secret is out on this guy, and teams are really going to focus on him this season. So I like him. I just don't want to overreach for a guy. It's the only option in an absolutely terrible offense.
Well, let's play the game. Let me throw some names out there and see who would rather have. It sounds like obviously Gimino's much higher on McLaurin. Courtland Sutton, Beer. Sutton or McLaurin?
Courtland Sutton, I have wide receiver 19. So give me Sutton.
Gimino, I assume you disagree.
McLaurin for me.
Yeah. So this is Metcalf?
Metcalf, I have wide receiver 21. So Metcalf over McLaurin.
Yeah. I mean, those guys are right in the same range for me. So Metcalf is like the same story. I mean, this guy is just a monster. So if you want to go Metcalf, by all means, I still think I'm trying to have more McLaurin.
Geis, you guys kind of threw him out there as like an injury risk, and who really knows? And Peterson's there, and they have plenty of bodies. And is it just to stay away, and that's that? There's like no ceiling?
This guy's still living on the hype, I think. People are still going back to, well, he could be this, and we saw glimpses of this. Well, it's been 2 seasons, and what's he played? 4 games, 5 games? So, you not only deal with the injury risk, it's not like you're getting a big discount on him either. He's cheaper than he has been, but it's not like he's down in the depths of the draft where you're like, oh, this guy's got a shot to really outproduce this ADP. So, again, a bad football team, running backs really got to be on a team that can score some points. I just don't see it here at Washington.
Underdog Fantasy, for what it's worth, I'm seeing McLaurin currently is the 20th drafted wide receiver. Gimino, is that about right for you? I guess you think he should go earlier, and Beer thinks he should go a little bit later.
Yeah, it's not that I think he should be going differently. I just think that he's going for like what his median outcome is, where I think there's a ceiling outcome for best ball that could be a lot higher. So that's why I'm excited about him. Going back to Geist for a second, I mean, the guy's got so many hurdles to become like a true best ball winner. I mean, he's got to unseat a Hall of Fame grinder, Riverboat Ronald's the coach right now. I mean, can you imagine what he's going to see down near the goal with Adrian Peterson? I mean, obviously they have Antonio Gibson and McKissick back there to do some of the McCaffrey stuff down near the goal. I mean, like how are you going to assign passing game work? How are you going to assign goal line work to Geist? I mean, when you look at what he does, in a microcosm, yes, if he was given the full workload, he would be awesome. He was super explosive when he played last year. But now you're talking about the injury history layering on top of all this and a season in which missed time is going to be a concern for other reasons. And I just don't see how you can get really excited for Geist at the price. He's got to clear so many hurdles.
He's going around running back 40 or so, and it sounds like neither one of you guys are particularly thrilled. Can anybody sell me on on a Steven Sims last round dart?
Yeah, I can. I think when you take a look at, Beer mentioned Antonio Gandy Golden is potentially looking at snaps here. Jeremy Sprinkle is their tight end.
Best name is give him that. The best
there's the one guy in the street that would name Jeremy Sprinkle. So we got 1 out of 100 there.
I mean, is Jeremy Sprinkle? Is it Richard Rodgers? I mean, who even knows what's going to happen?
Logan Thomas. Randy Moss's kid.
Yeah, that's not happening. So I mean, we are just absolutely drained of any potential elsewhere in the team. How could Steven Sims not have upside? I mean, now we're talking about upside. I mean, for the pick number 190 or whatever, right? I mean, we're talking about really deep into the draft. But I mean, he's been working outside. They say it would be better if he was working in the slot where he was last season. But either way, the guy's just going to be on the field enough pending his own health that I think you have to at least entertain the possibility that he could have a decent season for the price.
You got anything else this Washington football team here, Beer? Because it's not a fun conversation, clearly.
No, I already threw up in my mouth, so I'm ready to move on to the next team.
By the way, shout out to Cal, who had the foresight of getting the .com. Cal, one of the founders here at RG, I think it was WashingtonFootball.com, and he was paying the $20 or $30, whatever, every single year, and he went ahead and sold it. And he donated it to charity, which is awesome for a scholarship. So good for him. That was very, very cool. It was good to see. Find that on Twitter, that story. It's good stuff. All right, Houston is next. Another team that we're really enthused about, right? I mean, they have smart, if nothing else, very smart management, smart coaching there, Beer.
Oh yeah, I mean this is such a well-run organization. I mean, what team does not trade one of the top 3 wide receivers in the league and then get a washed-up running back in return? So just an amazingly run team here is the Houston Texans. But a couple hot takes for me. We'll start with that running back. I know David Johnson really starting to creep up the running back rankings. David Johnson will be an absolute bust this season. I think he's going way too high. People are trying to go back to the guy that was the number 1 running back in all of fantasy. Let's look at his fit here with the Houston Texans. He does not run between the tackles very well. The Houston Texans do not do a good job of throwing the running back the football. You have another Johnson there who's maybe a better pass catcher in Duke Johnson. So where is all this David Johnson production coming from? And you could make the Carlos Hyde argument. Great. Carlos Hyde was like a 12th round pick. You're having to spend a 3rd round pick, 4th round pick for David Johnson here. So absolute bust. On the other side, underdog, a guy that you want to target, in my opinion, is Will Fuller. Such untapped potential. The injury concerns are absolutely real, but this guy can put some massive games on the board. Hopkins is not there. Brandon Cooks alongside of him, who I don't mind either. You see those guys kind of go together in drafts, but Will Fuller is an absolute value here in these best ball drafts this year.
Gimino, this is the fire I want. This is the best ball hot take show presented by Underdog Fantasy. That was a hot take. David Johnson is toast. And by the way, I think he's only 27, 28 years old. He's still, plenty young.
Old 28 though.
Well, the oldest, Todd Gurley is the oldest 25-year-old man alive.
Yes.
I think he's but everybody remembers that the one gif or the one play where David Johnson looked like a 90-year-old man getting a handoff last year. It was the worst play. I think it was the only play of the game. And a lot of us in DFS world, we played him and he was terrible for the most part. But of course, several years back, he was amazing. He's going around running back 20. Is Beer onto something, or are you seeing some upside?
It's warm. I think you can still put your hand on the stove here. And I think a lot of people are kind of on this David Johnson is washed train. And I don't think I'm not going to have a strong take on this. I don't really know. I mean, the guy was once the team jam him in with Le'Veon Bell, another guy that I'm just not going to take like a fire stance on this season. I think both of those guys are likelier to have mediocre seasons than league winning seasons, but where they're getting drafted, I'm just not going to kill anyone for wanting to have that kind of imagination. The Will Fuller take is a more interesting take to me. I think that if you like 10 touchdowns, you'll take Will Fuller. If you like guys who are going to ascend from having just vertical downfield passing roles to having short and intermediate roles on a team that's going to have to throw it all day because they can't run it, they can't block anybody in the run game. And if you want to give a reason for David Johnson to fail, it's that particular reason alone. I'm looking at Will Fuller as another one of my favorite wide receiver targets that you can get round 7, 8, 9, somewhere in that range. And you can just absolutely potentially have yourself a, low end WR2, maybe, if things go perfectly, WR1. I mean, we're talking about Brandon Cooks as his competition. Brandon Cooks is nothing to write home about, whereas Will Fuller was 17th in Pro Football Focus's predictive yards per route run metric. I just love Will Fuller, and I think Beer's onto something there.
It's interesting. Beer started saying washed up. I thought he was talking about washed up wide receiver. So they got a washed up running back and a washed up receiver in Randall Cobb. That's they replaced their stud Hopkins with. All right, talk to me, Beer, as far as Fuller. Now he's going around wide receiver 29 or so. Obviously, value it matters, and where you draft guys matters. But just going back for a second, do you prefer him or do you prefer McLaurin?
I have McLaurin ranked. I have those guys back to back. So I have Will Fuller right now, wide receiver 25. I continue to move him up though. So he's going to end up probably closer to wide receiver 20 in my next set of projections here. So it's just a big fan. And the concern is the injuries. And we know that's real. You have to factor that in, but you also can't play scared and avoid every guy that's ever had an injury or an injury history. So I'm willing to take the shot on him. I think this is a fantastic stack. You're getting nice value on Deshaun Watson as well, who's kind of fallen behind Dak and Kyler Murray and some other names up there. So he's a guy I've seen available in the 7th round. I was doing a draft the other night. Deshaun Watson is still there. So there's a nice mid-round pairing. You go back to back and grab Fuller, Watson, Cooks, even I don't mind. But I think it's a very stackable team. I'm avoiding the running backs. Duke Johnson, I just don't know if there's going to be enough there for him to even be a value. But Watson and Fuller are definitely guys that I'm planning to pull the trigger on when that value when it drops. People are afraid of Will Fuller. It's too risky. I want to be the guy taking those risks. I don't want to sit back and play this safe. I want to win $200,000. I want Will Fuller to be a part of that because he can put some monster numbers on the board.
Yeah, we hear both strategies in this, Gimino. We talk about spike weeks, and Will Fuller are synonymous when it comes to best ball. But also you kind of sort of want a floor as well, too. Is that something you factor in? Is that something you care about? Or you just that's not something that goes in your thought process as far as drafting players?
Well, again, I think that we will see a floor with Will Fuller this year if he's, pending his health. We had Hopkins, sort of dominating that, first down throw, 8, 9, 10 yard, in breaking route type of a situation, or even on the sideline, doing a little dance move out there with the back shoulder throw. Who's going to get those targets right now? Are they going to go to Cobb underneath? Are they going to check down to Duke Johnson? Or are they going to try to get Brandon Cooks doing something that he hasn't really particularly done well in his career? I think it's going to be Fuller who's going to be the number one option in the passing game, and I think that could give him a higher floor than people think.
We have Cooks going around wide receiver 38. Gimino, is that too high, too low, or about right?
It's probably about right. I think that you could take chances on him, although he has not really proven to be much of anything in terms of consistency. So you're basically looking at like a dart throw, and you better have a bunch of wide receivers ahead of him. You don't really want to be taking shots with him as your, one of your top 3 or 4 guys.
Here, if you think David Johnson is toast, why not get some value in Duke, a running back 45? Or is that it's already kind of baked into his draft spot?
Because I think they're going to try to make this David Johnson thing work. You have to justify this trade, in a piss poor run organization is going to do things like that and worry about what are the fans thinking. And we got to get David Johnson the ball. How could we possibly trade away DeAndre Hopkins? So I just don't know how much work is going to be there for Duke. I was super excited when he went there last season, thought he was going to be the guy. And, they brought in Carlos Hyde, and that was the end of that story. So it just feels like leftovers. And it's one of those guys that maybe catches you 3-4 balls a game. it's really not moving the needle much to even add him at the end of the roster and be excited about it.
You're talking about Watson being available what round 7, round 8, or something like that, and he's quarterback 5, quarterback 6, depending on where you're looking. Generally speaking, the sharps tell me that you're supposed to wait on quarterback when it comes to best ball. Beer, is this a strategy you have? Is it sort of fluid based upon what the draft gives you? Did you take Watson when you saw him at 7 or 8, or you're just like, no, I'm not drafting a quarterback this early?
I generally want to wait, but you always want to be fluid as well. I think ideally you want to have a plan and some ideas and a structure, but the draft can always cause that to be thrown out the window. So I did not take him, and ended up, I probably should have, and waited a little bit too long in that draft, and ended up with Cam Newton and Gardner Minshew, who are guys that I like later on, some guys with some upside. We'll see if Cam ends up being the starter there. But, at that point, when guys like that are available, and you can make the same case with Mahomes and Lamar Jackson, if they start falling far enough, I'm going to throw that plan out the window and grab these guys. You know what you're going to get. You set it, you forget it, and you can really then pound the other position. So the plan, yes, ideally is wait it out, grab you a late round quarterback. And there's a lot of guys, Gimino and I both like that are, quarterback 17, 18. After the 20s, there's still names available. But, when some of these top 5, 6 guys last till round 7, round 8, you've already filled out pretty much your starting lineup. I don't hate grabbing them when the value falls.
Yeah, Roethlisberger is one of those guys we talked about in a previous show. I know you guys both liked. Gimino, you have a take on that?
I'm warming up to the idea of taking a quarterback a little earlier, but I'd like to get Carson Wentz a little bit later, right? Like there's a guy example of a guy I'd like to target who I think can be in that production range that I think you can draft later than you have to draft Watson, later than you have to draft Kyler Murray and Russ Wilson and Dak Prescott. But I think all those guys, I think they could have big seasons. And Watson in particular, because I think that team's going to be struggling on defense. I think that there could be a lot of shootout scenarios. I think there's a lot of potential bad defenses in play for that schedule. I just think that Watson has the upside. I don't know how often I'm going to get there because I want to construct my rosters waiting on the quarterback, but I'm not going to glue myself to it.
Have you adjusted your rankings for Russell Wilson with the new video, his new nickname, Mr. Unlimited? Does that change things for you guys? Did you guys see this or no?
I have not seen this, Dean. Now it's on my to-do list for after the show. So
it's wild.
Sounds like it's groundbreaking. If I'm going to be adjusting rankings, this better be good.
He gave himself, first of all, I don't know what the rules are, but I'm pretty sure you can't give yourself a nickname or your own alias. Maybe your own alias. I'm not really sure, but he's dubbed himself Mr. Unlimited, and it's a wild video. And I encourage you and all the listeners out there to check it out. It's definitely worth something. Well, Beer, you mentioned something. You said you drafted two quarterbacks, Minshew and Cam. Generally, as far as like roster construction, do you want 2 quarterbacks? Do you want 3 quarterbacks? Was there another person you didn't mention?
Oh, I threw in Fitzpatrick in the last round. So, I mean, I generally want, if I have 2 absolute studs, you're playing it a little risky because if you get an injury, you're down to one guy. So for the most part, I want to take 3, but there are some scenarios where I'll just go with the 2 guys and you hope for the best and you load up at a different position. Maybe you're thin at wide receiver, tight end, use that spot there. But for the most part, I feel good about having 3 guys.
Are we going to acknowledge the existence of Darren Fells or Jordan Akins, or are they basically like worse than Jeremy Sprinkle?
It's pretty bad. I mean, that's a tight end room. You just never know who it's going to be. I mean, Darren Fells comes out of nowhere and scores 38 touchdowns last season. So you never know. They keep drafting these guys. They want to work in these young guys. Then they have a veteran there. So I guess late, but I don't even have these guys on my rankings. That's how far off I am on these Houston tight ends.
All right, segue to Mr. Unlimited, the Seattle Seahawks. Gimino, talk to me about Russell Wilson.
Well, he's going to be running for his life again this season because their offensive line doesn't look to be seeing any type of improvement. So I can imagine another season that's a little bit like we've seen in the past seasons for Russ Wilson, except for the passing options around him have improved slightly. The rushing options have some question marks still. I mean, Carson's coming off injury. Penny's not going to be available at the start of the season. Carlos Hyde stinks. So I just think that we're looking at this passing game as far as the wide receivers are concerned as great options to target in best ball. And Russell Wilson is almost definitely going to be productive again. He's one of my favorite quarterbacks. I just can see this, being a situation where he's going to have massive production. Now, when you start layering on price to Russell Wilson, it's not as easy to get there. But I think from a raw production standpoint, it's going to be another fantastic fantasy season for Russell Wilson. Yeah,
top 5 quarterback. The question I always have, and this is a DFS conversation too, is Beer, if Pete Carroll had his druthers, they would let Russ not cook and throw the ball like 20 times and grind it in the ground, 3 yards cloud of dust. He's living in like 1997 with his offense. Unless, of course, they're down, then all of a sudden Russ goes nuts. Will they let Russ cook finally, or not so much?
I mean, it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks, is what they tell me. So, I mean, it seems like they'd say that, yeah, let's do that. And I don't know how you have this guy on your team and you just don't unleash him. Like if we had fourth quarter Russ for 4 quarters, he's number 1 quarterback. I'm taking him over everybody, but unfortunately we're not going to get that. And are they going to change their ways? I have a hard time believing that. So still like him. I have him quarterback 6. I do feel like there is a little bit of a drop off. I have Watson ahead of him. I just don't know how many times they're going to throw the ball. Now, the weapons are certainly there. Metcalf, Lockett are 2 guys I'm very high on. I have Lockett ahead of Metcalf. I think a lot of people have it the other way around. And Metcalf, yeah, he's going to give you those spike weeks, but so will Tyler Lockett. I think he's going to give you a little more consistency as well. And then you have Josh Gordon talk. They bring in Greg Olsen. We know they love to utilize the tight end spot. So you're dealing with an offense that we don't know how much they're going to throw the ball. That's the concern here. Are they going to add any more pieces to this team? Antonio Brown's name's been thrown around here as well. So I like Russ. Probably not a guy that I would draft because at that point, I would rather wait for a Carson Wentz, like Gimino mentioned, or a Matthew Stafford, things like that. So won't have a ton of Russ Wilson, but I do really like Lockett and Metcalf at their prices. I'm not afraid to reach on either of those guys.
Yeah, I'm pulling up as far as the ADP on Underdog Fantasy. Lockett right now, wide receiver 19. Metcalf, Gimino, is wide receiver 21. So they're basically the same. Lockett right ahead of them. Do you agree with that?
I agree with that. That's not how I've been seeing it elsewhere. But, at the end of the day, you've got a top 6 deep target receiver from a top 4 deep ball thrower. So we've got spike week potential here with Tyler Lockett. In addition to that, we've seen in the last couple of seasons that he can get a little bit of volume as well. So when you have these big week potential, some formats you'll find out there give you bonuses for drafting a guy like Tyler Lockett. Underdog Fantasy is still going to be fine because there's touchdown potential. They'll probably do one of those cute little dances when they get in the end zone like they did last year when you ever see the Seahawks end zone dances, Dean?
You get points for that? You don't get fantasy points for that, do you?
You should.
You get entertainment value.
Sure. I'm on board with that. Have a good time. Enjoy yourself.
I'm liking Tyler Lockett big time. I think he's a great value in drafts. Agree with Beer totally here. I think Metcalf is fine. I think you can, if you want to go for the upside, because, certainly we saw in the playoffs last year, Metcalf can absolutely explode. And this is year 1, physical freak. I mean, if you want to take either one of these guys, by all means do it. I'm favoring Lockett at the moment, but I'm not killing anyone for taking Metcalf.
Let's talk about Carson, Beer. It's around running back 25 or so is what I'm seeing. Let's see what the most recent ADP is. I'm kind of scrolling for it, but does that sound about right for you? And are you bullish? Are you bearish? Or it's just like if he falls to you, so be it. You're not seeking him out, but if it makes sense at the time, you'll click on his name.
So I have him RB20, so a little bit higher than ADP, but not a guy that I'm overly like, I have to have Chris Carson when I get to that point of the draft. I have Melvin Gordon right ahead of him, and Melvin Gordon's a guy like 4th round, I want Melvin Gordon. And then Chris Carson, I'm like, okay. If I need to fill a hole or fill a spot, I'll take him. So yes, higher than ADP, but not a guy I'm going to go and like reach to in the top 15 to grab here. I mean, there's injury concerns. What are they going to do with Carlos Hyde? I agree. He stinks, but they brought him in. They're probably going to give him work. Are they just going to toss Rashad Penny aside when he does come back? So a bad offensive line. I mean, there's still a lot of questions here with Chris Carson.
Gimino, I'm seeing on Underdog Fantasy currently looks like Carson's running back 17 right before Melvin Gordon and Fournette. Is that kind of like line up what you're thinking?
No, that's too high for me. I have him somewhere in the 20s as far as running backs concerned. Look, I think if you got Chris Carson for 16 games at full Chris Carson potential, yeah, I think he would probably be one of the best running backs you could draft. But I just don't see that as a high likelihood, given his history, given what we're seeing right now with the Seahawks in terms of their backfield situation. I'm not in love with Chris Carson. I think it's somebody that you're probably going to get like the kind of production you're drafting, like, you're running back 3 or running back 2. You're definitely not getting RB1 from what I'm seeing from Chris Carson. I just don't think he's going to play enough games at full potential.
Best tight end we've seen so far in this batch of teams is Greg Olsen. Old man Greg Olsen beer. And any interest there, or not so much anymore?
I mean, just because they do utilize the tight end spot, it's intriguing. Now, are they going to mix in some of these other guys? Is Will Dissly going to be back in the mix here at all? Jacob Hollister had some games that were okay. So I have Olsen tight end 22. So again, you know, if you wait, and you need a late guy, he gives you that veteran presence. I could see him scoring 5-6 touchdowns. I don't think he's ever going to give you massive spike weeks. So blah, I guess is what I could say for Greg Olsen. I'm not overly excited about him either.
You got anything to add there to that, Gimino, or it's just sort of meh?
It's definitely meh for me right now with the tight end situation. This is another one where, you know, if you gave me any one of these guys for sure as the lead dog for 16 games, I might be more interested. I just can't peg that, and I don't want to make too many bets on it.
Give me this, Gimino, before we move on. The player on Seattle you're most likely to draft, and the player on Seattle you're least likely to draft based upon their current ADP.
I'm definitely most likely to draft Tyler Lockett, the way that I'm trying to build my best ball rosters. And I am least likely to draft Chris Carson right now, where he's going. He's going in an area where I'm looking to draft wide receivers.
Beer, same question.
Likely to draft Lockett, probably least likely to grab Russell Wilson.
All right, let's move on. You're gonna watch that video and you're gonna change your mind. I'm telling you.
I will keep you updated. If I mean, he's sitting QB6 for me. So if I'm impressed by this video, maybe he's into that top 5. I'll let you know.
It's pretty wild. It's just awesome.
I mean, him giving himself a nickname that might knock him down a few pegs. Actually, I mean, you just don't hand out your own nicknames.
If you're good enough, though, and he is good enough, I mean, you know, I can't give myself my own nickname.
We got to come up.
I guess I kind of did with the almanac. Let's move on. Let's talk about the Buffalo Bills. Of course, Gimino, you're a part of Bills Mafia. You don't get any points for breaking tables, but they did add Stephon Diggs. Are we excited about that? Are we excited about the Bills prospect? And, you know, who do you want to open up with? Oh, Josh Allen. He's always a lot of fun, too.
Yeah, so you've got a team that has done a great job building a complete roster for real NFL wins. You have to like what the Bills are doing. Of course, I'm still waiting with bated breath to see what Trey Davis-White's going to do today, that we're going to get that news whether or not he's going to opt out of the season. But even so, I think that this defense can probably survive without him. It's just they won't be nearly as good. Josh Allen, let's get to the point for fantasy football. His price point is a little bit difficult for me to stomach. He's somebody that's definitely been reliant a lot on his rushing ability, and we should expect to see that. But I'm just not looking to try to pay a premium price tag for him when, you know, we just talked about a whole handful of guys that I like better that are basically costing the same amount. The team itself has just drafted a grinder running back in the draft to play the role of Frank Gore 2.0. They would probably rather not get into high-scoring shootout types of games. And I just think when it comes to fantasy football, you can draft Josh Allen's production for either cheaper or pay up more and get higher upside.
That's what we need in 2020, Beer. Grinder running backs.
Yeah, I mean, come on. Nope, I'm good with it. The hot take here is Devin Singletary is vastly overrated right now, and I like the player. You know, he came into the league and he's slow. He's this, he's that. This guy just has a good football IQ. If you watch him, he can play the game. He can get it done despite some of those limitations. But they bring in Zach Moss. They don't want to feature Devin Singletary. How much – look, answer me this. How much work is he going to get around the goal line? You bring in big old Zach Moss. You have Josh Allen, who we know loves to run the ball down there. Yeah. Well, what's left for Devin Singletary? So now he's got to be a guy that goes out and catches 70 passes to be a value, and they're not going to have that much opportunity for him. So – as much as I love the player, you have to look at the situation, and Gimino nailed it. This is one hell of a football team, top to bottom. Real life, they are going to compete and probably win that division this year, but we're playing fantasy. We need upside. We need guys that can outproduce where they're being drafted. I don't see it here with any Buffalo Bills. So Singletary, overrated. Stephon Diggs is going to be overdrafted based on his name. I don't know how many targets are going to be available. The one guy I can make a case for here is John Brown, who will go overlooked because people are going to say Stephon Diggs is there. What's left? John Brown still brings that deep ball ability. Josh Allen not afraid to throw that deep ball. This may help open some things up for John Brown. So he's a guy I see sliding down the draft boards, and I think that's a mistake. So Devin Singletary, overdrafted. John Brown, vastly underdrafted here for Buffalo.
Your thoughts, Gimino?
You want to know what the Ravens would look like if they weren't blowing teams out? It's like the Ravens that don't blow people out. That's what the Bills are going to be this year. So you're not going to get like the super high rushing production to go along with the passing production from Allen. I just want to stay away from the situation as much as possible for fantasy, even though I think that they'll win football games. I think Diggs is fine. He'll probably have some spike weeks, but I don't see this as your path to like the $1 million roster, to win the Underdog Fantasy, giant contest. I mean, are you really picturing Buffalo Bills on that contest right now where they're being priced? I don't think so. I don't think you're getting anywhere close to the combination of floor and ceiling that you want.
Hey, do you look ahead, and especially in this year, people always say, well, this is their playoff schedule, week 4. And, like, who even knows who's going to be playing at that point? Who knows if they are going to be playing? How much do you care about that stuff, Beer? And you don't even know who's going to be good and who's not going to be good. We're wrong all the time on that.
I think it's fine to look at it and factor it in, but it shouldn't be at the top of your list of things, especially this season. We don't know who's even going to be on these defenses to begin with. We know defenses, one year they're good, the next year, look at Jacksonville. They fall off a cliff. You have defenses that you don't think are going to be good, like a New Orleans that comes out of nowhere, or Tampa Bay that's just great against the run. So I take a peek at it. If it's very egregious, like they have 3-4 teams that are going to be horrendous, and we know that, okay, that's kind of the tiebreaker usually in my scenarios. But some of these bigger tournament, it probably has more validity. I remember playing in the draft best ball championships, and you try to backload and prepare for those last few weeks. So certainly something you should be looking at. I don't think it should be at the top of the list of things you're looking at, though.
Back to Allen for a second, by the way. I'm looking at the ADP stuff on Underdog Fantasy as far as quarterbacks specifically. Kyler Murray, 69 overall. Wilson, 72 overall. Watson, 76 overall. This is the quarterback run. And then Allen at 83. He's basically packed with all those guys, and it sounds like both you guys have him last. Is that correct, Beer? Is he the back end of a tier?
I have him QB8. So I have Watson's kind of the cutoff of my top tier, top 5 guys. Then I have Russell Wilson, Carson Wentz, and Josh Allen as another tier. But he's below Wentz for me. And when he gets drafted, that's kind of my alarm. And I'm glad Gimino brought up Wentz, because I think he could be the guy in this range that can really do some damage for you and win you one of these tournaments. So you have him going off the board. Now it's like, okay, I got to start thinking about Carson Wentz if I want to grab him here. I've rarely seen Wentz go ahead of Josh Allen. So you set those indicators for yourself. If you really want a guy, paying attention to ADP, knowing where guys are going is so important. We hear so much about ADP. I don't think people use it properly. They use it as kind of this is where I have to take this guy. To me, it's more of an indicator of where my guys are going to go when I need to grab them.
Gimino, your thoughts on that? And Diggs is going around wide receiver 27. Is that about right? Too high, too low?
That sounds about right to me. And I'm taking everyone ahead of him, probably ahead of him. Like I don't want to get fancy with Stephon Diggs here. Like, we're not going to see the situation that we saw last year with Kirk Cousins and Adam Thielen, just sort of being a triumvirate of all the passing game production. Albeit Buffalo doesn't have all kinds of different passing options, but also somehow the Bills' passing offense will be even lower volume than what the Vikings were. So just no thanks on Stephon Diggs if I can help it.
Beer, what about the one who knocks at tight end? Any interest in Dawson?
I mean, some. I mean, it's kind of the theme of the show here. Like, all these tight ends are kind of like, I mean, if that's where I end up, if I waited too long and I need to get somebody, sure. I mean, I do think this kid has some talent. If you watch him, that they'll get him the ball very creative ways. But again, how much volume is there? And he's the 4th, 5th best option at best in a very low volume offense to begin with. So you're not going to get spike weeks out of him. So pretty far down on the tight end list, to be honest.
Probably no spike weeks for Cole Beasley either. Every week he's going to give you that like 5 for 40, more or less.
I mean, 5 for 40. Some people, that's their thing. No good. No thanks for me.
Your thoughts on those two guys there, Gimino?
Dawson Knox, if you just completely desperate at tight end, if you've really held off and you didn't get the guys that you were actually looking for, I don't mind just like an emergency pick of Dawson Knox. Granted, you're going to have to run really, really good touchdown-wise to get there with a guy like Knox, but he's certainly got some athletic ability and some talent that could supersede where people are drafting him. So I think that as an emergency pick, he's someone that I'll probably have a handful of. I will have almost zero Cole Beasley if I have any at all. And it would be only as like the round 20, like it's impossible to find anyone with upside. When is Cole Beasley going to ascend to be a league winner? Like if you're picking anyone at the end of these drafts, and especially playing for these big money tournaments, you definitely want to pick somebody who has at least a shot in hell of becoming someone who could like randomly through injury become a player that can win you a league. Cole Beasley is never going to do that.
No.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
I mean,
right.
even if Diggs and John Brown both go down, I mean, are we even excited about Cole Beasley at that point? I mean, so I agree. There's just no upside there.
It's Gabriel Davis season.
It's somebody's season. It ain't Cole Beasley season. I know
that. Same questions as before. Let's run that back. Beer, the player you're most likely to draft on Buffalo and the least likely guy.
John Brown for me. I think it's great value. It's one of those guys later in the draft that does have upside. And if something were to happen to Diggs, we saw what he can do in a wide receiver one role. The least likely is Devin Singletary. I mean, people are going off the last season, and you have a much younger Frank Gore in there now, a guy I think can play, and Zach Moss. So Singletary being drafted way too high for my taste.
All right, Gimino?
I'm most likely to fade the entire team than draft any of these guys. And
wow.
So I'm technically least likely to draft any of them, but the least of all, I agree Devin Singletary is a player that I will have.
Is this an emotional hedge? Like you're rooting for the Bills, but like you don't want to – either way you win if they do or not so much?
Keep in mind, I've been watching the Bills since they were in those Super Bowls, Dean. I have no problem fading the Bills.
I didn't know you're that old. I was a Houston Oilers fan back in the day, and Andre Reed stepped out. He stepped out of bounds, and he came back in, and that was nonsense, and that's what led to the 30-point comeback or whatever it was. I'm still angry
35, 38-3. It was I remember that game. It was insane.
Dean, if you recall, the Houston franchise got us back some years later with the old lateral kickoff. So don't worry about it.
Was it a lateral or was it a forward pass? Do we know?
Well, they got us. Don't worry.
Good old Frank Wycheck. Last but not least, let's move on to the Indianapolis Colts. Phillip Rivers and his 27 kids. Well, he's just going to be the quarterback. I guess the kids will be rooting him on somewhere. But, Rivers is now manning the Colts. Not really excited about Phillip Rivers here. Jonathan Taylor, the running back, with Mac also there as well, too. Overall thought process as far as his team, how are we attacking it from a fantasy perspective for you, Beer? What's jumping out for you?
I really like this team. I think there's a lot of different things that are both underrated and overrated on this team. We can start with Phillip Rivers. I'm out. No, thank you. If you watch this guy last, you want to talk about washed. Phillip Rivers is done. I mean, you watch the guy throw the football. I don't even know how he even got in the league with this sidearm technique. And he had some good years. He had his times, but those days are done. So Phillip Rivers, I'm out on. Some of the receivers, intriguing. T.Y. Hilton, I'm out on him as well. I like Michael Pittman a lot, but you have to worry about rookies this season, especially wide receivers. You know, rookie running backs, it's an easier transition, but these receivers without any reps, it's going to be really hard to get them going. So as much as I like him, probably passing on him as well. The guy I really want to talk about here, and I hope it's not my homerism, but I love me some Jonathan Taylor here behind this offensive line, which we know is just a bunch of road grinders. So Jonathan Taylor, I think initially was being drafted too high, but now the hate's gone a little too far. I think he's being underdrafted at this point. So Jonathan Taylor, underdrafted. Rivers, no thank you. T.Y. Hilton, no thank you. Jack Doyle, a guy I do like. I don't want to talk about all the guys here. Of course, I just named them all. I'm going to give some time to my boy Gimino. The point is, I think Jonathan Taylor is going to be fantastic on this team. Fits so well behind this line. I think he will catch passes. I think Marlon Mack will be involved, but this is Taylor's backfield.
All right, let's start with Taylor. First of all, this is interesting because I pulled up the Underdog Fantasy ADP currently stuff right now, and it's only been, for a couple of days, whatever it is, so it's not a huge sample size, I guess. But take for this what you will. Taylor is drafted 20 as the running back, number 20 running back overall, and the aforementioned David Johnson, 21. I'm assuming you prefer Taylor over Johnson, right, Beer?
Taylor all day. I have Taylor RB 17 right now and probably going to move him up even a little higher.
Gimino, a really, really sharp person, told me that I'm not allowed to draft rookies in COVID season. Can I make an exception here with Taylor?
Well, Dean, do you like 99th percentile speed scores with upper percentile bursts and agility with the number one offensive line on a team that has proven they want to run 2 tight end sets and get the ball in the hands of their playmaking backs. Do you like that, Dean? Do you like?
Is that rhetorical?
It's rhetorical, Dean. You like Jonathan Taylor. I know you do. This is not just some regular, like, run-of-the-mill prospect. And look, running backs are the ones that you would lean towards anyway, right? Like, you definitely want to be cognizant of the price here with Jonathan Taylor. He is rather expensive, and they still do have Marlon Mack, who's pretty good the last time I checked. But I do think that Taylor's going to be very difficult to keep off of the field, and that this is going – they called it a 1-1 punch. They're going to have Taylor and Mack sort of splitting the duty like we've seen with some other, like think Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara type situation, right? Like if this offense is actually getting a lot of production on the ground, you could see both Taylor and Mack have decently respectable seasons. Again, for fantasy, I'm not 100% sure that Jonathan Taylor is going to be the guy that's going to get you where you want to go in these best ball tournaments, but I definitely love him as a player. And I could see if Matt goes down, there is a scenario where Taylor is huge.
T.Y. Hilton, you love him in the dome. He has those spike weeks as well too. Health always a concern with him. I'm seeing running back, wide receiver 27. At least this is like not too long ago. I want to see the update as far as Underdog Fantasy. Are you a Hilton guy, Gimino, or I feel like you're not? Something tells me you're not for some reason.
No, I got a hot take here as far as who is most interesting to me in the passing game, and it's not T.Y. Hilton, and it's not even Michael Pittman, but we're just talking about Hilton right now. I mean, he's a little banged up I feel like he's always banged up, but then you look, he never really misses games. He always ends up playing through the injury. Situation right now with him is I think that they definitely want to run the ball and sort of have that mentality where they're using those backs as the centerpiece of their offense. And I just don't expect like a massive season from Hilton. I do think he'll be productive for the price, and I'm fine if you want to like take a flyer on him if he falls, but he's not someone I'm being proactive about. Dean, they run 2 tight end sets here, and Jack Doyle is all well and good, but like you can draft Trey Burton in the 20th round.
Yes.
Like if you're trying to play these best ball tournaments, I think Trey Burton's a play that you should be looking at trying to get to a little bit here. They've been talking him up recently. It wasn't that long ago that he was in Frank Reich's offensive system, being very productive for the Eagles. I'm looking at his run with the Bears. It was rather unfortunate. There were some injuries. He was on the Bears, quite frankly, which is never a good sign for any fantasy player lately, it seems. So I'm looking at Trey Burton here on the Colts as a potential revitalization project.
Beer, you got excited when you heard Trey Burton.
I love it. I mean, it's such a good fit in this offense. And not to mention Phillip Rivers loves throwing the tight ends. Look at his history with the Chargers. That guy fed the tight ends all day long. So I do like Doyle as well, but I have Trey Burton ranked ahead of the guy we just talked about, Dawson Knox. So that's how much I'm excited about Trey Burton. He's going to be a big part of this offense. So one other name we didn't bring up, I think does have some upside late in your drafts, is Paris Campbell, who we saw just dealt with a ton of injuries, but this guy's a playmaker. Go back to his Ohio State days, and you put the ball in his hands, good things happen. And I think that's going to happen here. Pittman getting acclimated. Eventually he becomes the Vincent Jackson is what I keep hearing of this offense. That's all fine and good down the road, but they're going to need somebody initially. And I think Paris Campbell, the cheaper version of what T.Y. Hilton can do.
Beer, confirm, deny? I'm sorry, Gimino.
I'm a little skeptical on Paris Campbell. I mean, I think that there's definitely some talent here. He's like he's an athletic type of a guy. He's got a lot of speed. Last year, like Beer mentioned, he was dealing with injuries, so we never really got to see him take off. But I just think the offensive system doesn't really lend itself well to what he can do. I see him as kind of a run after the catch guy, and I don't really see him as the kind of guy who's going to at any point ascend to pure number one status. Like you said, if you're taking some of these guys later in the draft, I think you would probably like to have some inkling of that. I just see him as sort of a timeshare guy throughout the 2020 season.
I'm scrolling through. I'm trying to see where Trey Burton's going in Underdog, and I can't really find him.
He's not going. He's not going.
Undrafted. Yeah, he's probably not even on the list.
Wow. Okay, he's not even being drafted. I'm seeing he was 27 according to our stuff. I guess I don't know how accurate that is of late, but that is interesting. But you like him, so basically take him in the last round. Is that the thought process here?
That for me, yeah.
Yeah, I don't hate that either, especially if you do end up with Rivers. I mean, the pairing makes sense, but even if not, I think he's going to have a bigger role than people realize.
And Doyle is just going a little bit too early?
I think there's value on Doyle as well. I mean, can he stay on the field is the question here. So, it wouldn't shock me to see these two guys kind of cannibalize each other. So why not take the cheaper of the two guys?
Jimino, do you expect, like, kind of like we say Seattle should be, like, taking advantage of Russ, but we also say that Phillip Rivers is toast and he's old, and like Seattle, what they're doing and what they want to do is what Indianapolis probably should do, even though it's 2020, you should be throwing the ball. But is that what we're saying? Like, they're probably best suited to run the ball here?
I don't think that's how Frank Reich's going to run his offense. I think they're going to try to find some balance. Like, they're not going to go full Schottenheimer on us. They're going to definitely have the passing game involved with what they're trying to do. I just think that they're going to have an element of their offense in which they won't have 2 and 3 wide receivers producing fantasy relevant numbers. When you talk about getting to the top of the best ball tournament, you might find one of those guys if you're lucky, but otherwise I'm looking at the backs and the tight ends as the primary options here in Indianapolis.
Why not trade Frank Reich for Pete Carroll? That makes all the sense in the world. Does it not, Beer?
I mean, now we get it with this. If Pete Carroll had this offensive line, Russell Wilson would be like quarterback 38. He would never throw the ball.
All right, Beer, the player on Indianapolis you're most likely to draft and the player you're least likely to draft. And get a hot take as far as the entire show on the ready. Get one in the chamber for you because I'm going to ask you in a second. But as far as Indianapolis specific, your favorite player, considering ADP, and your least favorite.
I like Jonathan Taylor. We know that. I like Trey Burton. I'm glad he came up. I like Paris Campbell. So the answer, the one, is Jonathan Taylor. I'm willing to risk it on him. And you may get burned paying that price for him. You can get a guy like J.K. Dobbins way later in the draft, some of these other rookies, but I do think there's tremendous upside behind that offensive line. Least likely to draft, I hate Phillip Rivers, but I'll say T.Y. Hilton. I just think people are going to overpay for the name there as well.
Gimino?
I think I'm going to be most likely to draft one of the backs, either Mac or Jonathan Taylor, and I'll probably be least likely to draft Phillip Rivers.
Hey, Beer, let me ask you this. The 5 teams we talked about today, Washington, Houston, Seattle, Buffalo, Indianapolis, which is your favorite team to try to get a stack from?
I want to say Indianapolis, but I don't want Phillip Rivers. So I'm going to have to say Seattle here just because we know Russ can put up those numbers when they need him to, and that will greatly affect the wide receivers, as we know, and pretty limited tree. Even if they bring Josh Gordon in, we know it's going to be a lot of Lockett and Metcalf. So it may be challenging getting both of those guys since they get drafted so closely together, but maybe you're on a 4-5 turn and, you pull the Lockett and Metcalf double tandem and grab some Russ to go with it. So I'll say Seattle out of this group. As much as I like Indy, I just don't know if Phillip Rivers can get it done for you.
Yeah, same question, Gimino. Again, consider opportunity cost, obviously.
Imagine if I said Washington.
I was just going to say, this guy loves McLaurin so much, and pairing him up with Alex Smith. So
what quarterback do you pick? Team.
Yeah, no, you're not taking Washington. It's definitely Seattle in this particular case. I mean, I think that if you can get Wilson for a pretty good price, maybe if he drops to the 5th or something like that, then maybe you can get a turn where you get like a Lockett and Wilson combination, and maybe that's a stack. But truthfully, none of these teams are really on the top of my stacking list at all.
All right, this is the Best Ball Hot Take Show presented by Underdog Fantasy. George Costanza taught us we got to finish strong. We got to go out on a high note. Give me the hottest of hot takes. Give me something scalding. Who wants to bat first? Because there is a raise in this as well. Who wants to set the bar?
I want to bat first because I'm going to call Gimino out here, and this is not the hot take. I'm just going to set it up here. Little starter here, but Will Fuller outscores Terry McLaurin this season in fantasy points, and Will Fuller finished the season top 5 at the wide receiver position in fantasy points. So there you go. Beats McLaurin, top 5 receiver, Will Fuller. Gimino, what do you got?
Okay, so mine actually, I have written down here that I think Will Fuller will definitely score 10 touchdowns this season. Like that, I think that's a pretty hot take. I mean, that's a situation I don't think a lot of people, but I'll go with one for Terry McLaurin. I'll give you 2 for the Redskins. The sun is more likely to explode by the end of the day than for Dwayne Haskins to complete all 16 games as a starter for the Washington Redskins. But I still think Terry McLaurin will have 100 catches this season, no doubt about it.
Wow.
There you go. That's I asked for hot takes. I got hot takes. I much appreciate it, guys. That was Chris Prince. You guys know him as Beermakersfan. That was Christopher Gimino. I guess you just know him as Gimino. The guy, ownership. He does all sorts of things. Like we do at RG. He's almost definitely got his hands in it to some extent.
Gimino, you got to give yourself a nickname. Like me? Russell Wilson. Gimino's got to give himself a name. He can
Will we call him the Tinkerer?
What's the Russell Wilson nickname?
Mr. Low Limit. Mr. Low Limits. That's me.
I want both you guys to watch this after the show. Go ahead and find the video. Everybody out there watching, check out, if you've probably seen it, it's on the Twitter machine. But yeah, Mr. Unlimited, Russell Wilson, and it's definitely worth your minute or whatever it is of watching, because yeah, that said, we do appreciate Underdog Fantasy for presenting the show. And yeah, $25 you can turn it to $200K. The signature Best Ball Mania tournament is going down. $1 million total prize pool. It's not the only contest they have, but that, of course, there is their feature contest. That said, and we'll have more shows going in the future. Okay,
real quick. Don't forget, there's a live show tonight. If you're not familiar with Underdog Fantasy, you want to check it out. There's going to be a show tonight. We're going to do a couple a week. I think another one tomorrow afternoon, where we will be drafting live. The cast of characters from RotoGrinders will get on there and show you where we're drafting guys here in Underdog. So 7:30 Eastern tonight, there will be a show right after baseball locks.
Are you one of those cast of characters?
Tonight I am not, but I will be on some of the shows for sure. I mean, I'm super excited about this. I wish Underdog would have jumped in while we were all sitting at home dealing with coronavirus. But hey, we never too late here to jump in on the party.
Thank you, Underdog Fantasy, for presenting the show. This was the Best Ball Hot Take Show. That was Beer. That was Gimino. Or maybe I'll have a new nickname next week. We'll see. Stay tuned. We'll be back with more football. 5 more teams. I was Dean. We're out of here. That was also football. Holler.